Welcome everybody to the Open Source International Intelligence Interagency Briefing. We're glad that you decided to join us today. Give me 1 second, I'll get my act together. With us, we have EJ Herold. Say, hey, EJ.
Hi, guys, ladies. All good to hear you all.
That's right. We have EJ here. I'm Dave Lowe. I'm your GovBrief host. And we want to welcome all the folks that are joining us. It is amazing how many agencies, different agencies, are interested in this particular briefing. We appreciate you guys joining us. Today, we know that you have plenty of things that you can do. Hopefully, this briefing is beneficial for you and you can participate. It is not difficult. You can chat, you can raise your hand, you can ask questions, you can even shoot things to GovSupport at IISS.org if you have something outside that you don't want everybody else to talk about or know about. You can shoot an email directly to them. And we have briefing controls. You can see this little thing on the right-hand side. That's where mine is anyway. But you can make us bigger or make us disappear altogether. If you prefer death by PowerPoint, you can do that. A quick disclaimer, this event is not affiliated or endorsed by DOD or any agencies, provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only. And participation by you in this is voluntary and you can engage, and it doesn't mean that you have to buy from anybody. It's not an endorsement or commitment to purchase from anyone, and that is given to us by our folks at GSA. So there you have it. Real quick, the session agenda, will do some introductions or let you know who EJ is and what is open source intelligence if you're not really familiar with that term. Also, some of the agency challenges for civilian and military. We'll get into some case studies with Military Balance Plus. That is your product right there, right, EJ?
That is correct.
That's right. We'll be talking about that. We'll get to some of your questions and hopefully be able to answer those questions and talk about some procurement options and get you out of here, hopefully within 40 minutes, which is what is our objective. You will find the session handouts. Let me get this for you real quick. Make sure I have these. Zoom does not allow attachments, so we have to do it this way. I'm going to put it in the chat for everyone to see. And there's 4 documents that are there for you to be able to download and have access to. We will also be doing a couple of polls. Where are my polls? Where did my polls go? I might have to run them from here. 1 second. Awesome, here we go. Let's launch this poll today. Here we go. Why are you here today? I'm interested in learning about open source intelligence. My agency uses international intelligence. I work with intelligence. You can do as many as you want, by the way. We work with policy. I work with intelligence for acquisition strategies. And some folks here do defense, economic trends, and forecasts. We know that because we know some of the folks that are here. And my boss made me come. Somebody's got to choose that one. Somebody's got to be a Weisenheimer, right, EJ?
Exactly right, Dave.
So we appreciate you guys letting us know why you're here today. And we'll have some additional areas for you to participate. We have, I think, over 70 folks have registered for this, so we'll see how many. We know that some folks won't be able to make it, but we appreciate you guys letting us know about this. So let's start talking a little bit about IISS. That's how you like to refer to yourself, the International Institute for, hold on a second, for Strategic Studies.
Well, that's right, Dave. This is an international think tank, a research institute, and we were founded in 1958, starting to look at the questions of mutual assured destruction and the use of nuclear weapons during the Cold War. Since that time, we've grown from the first location in London to add 4 more in Berlin, Manama, Bahrain, Singapore, and of course, Washington, D.C. And that's the office that I head up for the organization. We're considered a world-leading authority on global security, political risk, and military conflict, and renowned for our research and our publications. And the one that we're talking about today is the Military Balance, which has for 60 years been the go-to guide for all of the information on military equipment, forces, and economics around the globe. We have in fact taken that what is an annual publication and turned that into, or turned the database that supports that publication into a subscribable product called the Military Balance Plus. And that's what we're here to talk about this morning. The other things that we're known for are in fact, the Manama Dialogue and the Shangri-La Dialogue, which are government-to-government events that take place throughout the year, where we bring the high-level international practitioners from national governments together to talk to each other, as well as with our researchers and representatives of those governments and industry. So it's quite an interesting gathering of folks. But getting back to the Military Balance Plus, this is an open source data and analysis resource tool. And if you can go to the next slide, I think most of your audience that are on this call today are probably familiar with the term OSINT, but for those who aren't, it stands for Open Source Intelligence. And it's that information that is gathered and analyzed from publicly open and available sources as an aid to decision making. OSINT doesn't rely on covert sources and methods, so it's not classified intelligence, but it is, if you will, we think as good as it can be from publicly open and available sources. So it's readily exploitable data that can be used in public communications by government, industry, and expert communities.
I think that's one of the most important things about what we're talking about, is that immediately this can be used in press conferences, and publicly, just pressing out to the public. And I love some of the stories that you've told me about how you have the ability to help even those in the intelligence community, because there's certain information that if it's not redacted, obviously you have serious implications for exposing sources and methods, right?
Well, exactly right. And, you know, the value of open source intelligence is that it is not, it doesn't call into question any sources or methods because it's open and published. It's available through, you know, institutes like ours who publish research. It's available through the press who publishes, you know, their information. It's available through government publication of data that they make available to the general public. And what we do, and other organizations like us do, is to gather and collate that information to create a repository that can be searched and used to confirm questions of substance, quantity, and quality, depending on the topic that you're looking at. In our particular case, this is generally speaking defense data, and so we're looking at the defense equipment, the personnel numbers, deployments, locations, acquisition plans, economic data, etc., that are published. And in the case of Military Balance Plus, we represent the information from 171 nations around the globe.
That's fantastic. And some of the areas where these can be used, we mentioned just putting out to the public, but let's talk about some of the places where you see your intelligence being used.
So on the slide in front of you, it says policy development, acquisition strategies, defense economic trends, and visualizing armaments modernization and sales. If we can go to the next slide, what you see is an example chart on the right-hand side. And what this does is it portrays graphically information that is gleanable from the Military Balance Plus database. This particular chart shows NATO partners around the world and China's partnerships in red. And in the hashed blue and red is, of course, Russia and Pakistan and Afghanistan, who have relationships with both NATO and with China. So it's a visual display of information that can be readily gathered from the information that we collate.
And we have that as a handout, by the way. That's one of the handouts that you can download if you want to see the details of that.
And these handouts are among those that are published on our website, so readily available to those who are interested. In terms of policy development, Dave, you mentioned the fact that open source information is great for sharing publicly, and some examples of where our information has been readily quoted are in press statements, in congressional testimony here in the United States, on the record speeches and lectures given by government officials, industry officials, and the opinion forming community, so journalists, academics, and other researchers. And we think that having reliable open source intelligence that is easily shareable with partners and allies makes policy development across borders that much more fluid and simple. When it comes to acquisition strategies, this chart is an example of showing the regional deployment of various UAV capabilities. We think that having 8 years worth of military equipment and acquisition information that can be searched helps you to identify the age of equipment that are in current inventories and allows for planning for those who are engaged in foreign military sales, foreign military funding, or direct commercial sales as they look at where they can offer their products into markets that may be looking to either purchase for the first time or to purchase replacement equipment as they go forward. So the ability to sort and sift publicly available information about the current state of acquisitions in a variety of nations is, we think, quite interesting and useful. On the next slide then.
Yep.
When you talk about defense economics, you're talking about everything from the percentage of GDP that is spent on defense, how much of defense is spent on equipment and recapitalization, being able to understand the evolution of a nation's gross domestic product and the evolution of its defense budget over time, particularly looking backwards to see how their policies have played out. If they said 5 years ago they were going to have raised their defense budget by so much, where is it today, and how has it evolved? But also, more importantly, the ability to look into the future and to understand the intentions that have been expressed by nations about where they're going to be spending money going forward. We have, if it's publicly published by these nations, we do in fact have it in our database. You can look at the defense projections for nations, and we've added a new what if budget tool that allows you to play games with the funnel, if you will, going into the future of, well, what happens if it falls short by 2%, 5% of what they projected, or what if they do better than they projected, or GDP goes up because the economy is better? How does that change their forecast? And you can play with that tool and use that information to project into the future. In particular, our data is normed against a data standard of 2015 as a base year for the comparison between dollars and the national currency. And that allows for comparing apples to apples across nations and across time.
Very interesting. Now, how does this apply to non-DOD or the civilian agencies? We have folks from Peace Corps and other agencies that are not in the DOD spectrum, but there's a lot of information that can be gleaned, right, to support their information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is predominantly based on a base of defense information, but the economic data contains total budget figures, the gross domestic product of the nations, and a number of other breakdowns within the data that can easily be demonstrated in a demo if folks are interested.
Sure, sure. And with that, you also mentioned armament sales, right? We have a lot of companies that want to participate from this country, as you mentioned.
Sure, and this chart is a comparison between the plans of Greece and Turkey going back to the early 1970s and out through 2020 for the production of naval assets and the commissioning of new corvettes, frigates, and submarines. And what it does is it shows you over time how they've added in new capabilities, which can easily be searched for within the database to compare and contrast. The parameters for search are extremely broad and numerous, so you can drill down to a great level of detail across what nations are doing. And you can see the age of systems to predict when they're going to be looking to replace things. You can find out who's already in the space, who are the competitors that have sold previously and maybe looking to repeat as the producer of choice. And you can see who the subcontractors are and where the opportunities are where a procurement may be in discussion but has not yet been finalized, offering an opportunity to break into competition and to offer alternatives. So it's really quite interesting, not just from the sheer data, but being able to map the activity of nations, companies, and sales across a number of parameters.
Super. All that is great. And we'd like to know, what open source data resources do you currently use? There's CIA Factbook, Avocent, Jane's Defense, Military Balance. That's your magazine, right?
Yeah, that's right. The Military Balance publication. It's a book.
Publication is a book. Defense News, other, not sure. And there are no wrong answers here. We just love to know where you guys operate in and what you're looking for, because in addition to what we're talking about here, a lot of this is leaning towards defense. That's a strong point for IISS, and yet you do other consulting and providing additional information as well, don't you?
Yes, we do engage on specific questions that our clients have for us about markets and the activity of governments and industry within the markets. And so we do a full spectrum look at various regions around the world. We have experts in language, in international affairs, in culture, in conflict and development, in environmental issues and green strategies. So while the basis or the foundation of our organization is defense and defense policy, we've branched out quite far and wide, as have many other similar research institutes, and cover a full spectrum of activities.
And Ryan just mentioned FPDS-NG is the main data source used by many within DoD. Yes, for internal contracts with the Department of Defense in the United States. Absolutely right. It is the main repository, which I know EJ knows about. So, but
and we're not necessarily looking to compete against that data source. The reality is that sometimes the information can't be shared, and having an alternative source of readily quotable, reliable, and verified information that we stand beside as being accurate and at least triple vetted before it's published, is a valuable tool that you can use in public discussions. So
absolutely,
we think it's a nice complement to other sources of information available within the government sphere.
Right, and FPDS being domestic, you're looking at international much more of an international scope. Look at how many countries do you look at?
171 countries, including the United States.
So there you go.
And in particular, it's important to know that the information that we have, while being open source, we do seek validation from governments that we have the right information, and we work with them in cases where they contest our data. And usually the reason for contesting the data is that we may have defined something as a corvette and they've defined it as a frigate. But in fact, in order to compare apples across nations, their frigate for our purposes is a corvette, and we keep it in that category. So they don't always agree with us, but they understand our methodology, and we publish that transparently to everybody so that they understand how we go about that.
And I think that's what's really important, is that one of the things that your organization does is to say, okay, what is really apples to apples? Because without that baseline, it's very difficult to make comparisons, right?
Yes, exactly right.
Mm-hmm. So let's get to some of the case studies that you have, because there's Military Balance Plus is a very deep and wide tool, right? So let's talk about some specifics where this has been used in the past, and you've been around for a while, right? You didn't just start this last week. No,
that's right. In fact, as I said, our information, our data sources go back 60 years. The Military Balance Plus is a relatively young offering to the commercial community, in the sense that the database as a tool has only been offered for the last 4 years, and we continue to update and improve on it as we go. In fact, the economic forecasting function that I just described has been rolled out in this year's updates. We update the information continuously throughout the year as new information is brought to our attention, or as our researchers find it in their studies. And these two case studies that we'll go through now are illustrative of just how complex questions can be addressed in short order through a number of queries to our database. So in case study A, we have a company that had developed a new capability for rotary wing aircraft in desert conditions, and they were looking to deploy that in the international market and build a business development strategy. So they wanted to know how large a market they could expect for this technology. So the question was, how many countries are operating the platform around the globe, the original platform operated by the US? How many of those countries, who was operating it in a desert environment? And then what kind of defense budget information was available to support going after customers in that market space? So we had a number of queries conducted on our data modules, where we first looked at the equipment data set to generate a global view of how many pieces of equipment were being operated around the globe. Then the deployment data set allowed us to narrow down the nations that were operating that equipment, who had been operating alongside US forces in a desert environment in the last 5 years. And then using the defense economics data set, we could further neck it down to identify the overall size of defense budgets in each of the target countries, and the budget share, if published, that they were dedicating to defense investment spending, to help that company build a better picture of the potential market for their product in the sphere. So you see, we could take a really big unknown, break it up into a series of pieces, do specific queries on different data sets, and bring it all together to present a coherent picture to the company, our client, in a very short order of time. And this type of a query takes, quite honestly, a matter of minutes once the the parameters are understood.
And that's the power of it being online as opposed to being in the book, right? Because military.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to do this using the book, going through and doing this manually would take a number of hours, if not days. Mm-hmm. But being able to use our search functions within the data tool and to query the different data sets in this way, we have these answers in a matter of minutes.
That's fantastic. And so we have another one talking about being a joint venture, creating a joint venture.
This is an example of partnership and cooperation. So while it's a question of two companies, it could just as easily be a question of two countries cooperating. In this particular case, Company C had a product, Company B was entering a joint venture with that company, and they were looking to provide a jointly produced product to the market that had already been served by Company C. And they wanted to know what the competitive environment was and how much of a real opportunity there was for them. So we started off with a first query looking at the global overview of all holdings related to the type of equipment that Company C's product represented. So you find out how many widgets there are in the world that are being used in today's armed forces. The result was then filtered to identify those countries operating relevant competitor products and subdivided those products into those where Company C was a customer and where Company C was not a customer of those countries. So you have the competitive landscape mapped out with that revision. And then the next query looked at procurement activity because we know the announced procurements, we know the various stages of those procurements. Are they ongoing, already under contract, still in negotiations, etc. We were able to identify where the contract opportunities were and where they shouldn't waste their time with going after things that were already a done deal, even though their product might have been a competitor. So it helped them to understand the market space and to further refine their business development plans as a joint venture going forward. And again, as I say, that's a commercial example. You can see that there are parallels in the international relations sphere where you're talking about relations between countries for finding out activities that are that lead to opportunities for mutual benefit and cooperation.
And I think that's what's really important is that I've been around the government long enough to know that when we're working with other agencies, you're looking at how this works within an agency. Agencies have different missions, different things that they need to accomplish, no different than a corporation. And it's all a matter of the data that you're putting at the front end of this, of what it is that you're requiring to get the results. And as you mentioned, EJ, you're not talking about waiting weeks or months for this information to be accumulated and then presented for review, right?
No, that's right. And in fact, the beauty of the tool is that the operator, which is anyone in your audience here, can do this from their desktop. And by playing with the parameters that they choose, they come up with answers to their questions. The really cool thing about the database is that all of the information of the database is exportable into Excel for further manipulation and presentation in charts and slides and graphics and any type of tool that the audience may find useful to express the results of their search.
Yep. And to your point, agencies can benefit from these types of results as well. Like you mentioned, rapid answers. How long does it usually take once you get the criteria in your system?
I mean, once you click, the information comes up. So really, it's a matter of how fine you parse, and it's a Boolean language of and or if then. So there's a whole series of things in the search page that allow you to drill down quite far, or to stay very high level and topical. So really, it's a flexible and easily manipulable tool to get results quickly.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you can export it in Excel to manipulate, supporting the policy and procurement within the organization, just from a very high level down to the nuts and bolts of how you can participate with other agencies, potentially even other countries, and using that. This is the one that always gets me is immediate public usage. Can you reiterate how important that is for folks?
So Dave, I'm thinking about, my days in uniform, and, I was an action officer having to meet a deadline and produce something that was going to be briefed and used. And, you can think of all kinds of scenarios, but I like the notion that you're preparing testimony for your boss to go up on Capitol Hill, and he needs to know, how many tanks do the Russians have in the Western Military District facing off against the Baltic states, on the northwest or northeast frontier of NATO. You get that information in a matter of seconds without having to get it cleared or declassify anything. It's available through the data tool. It's readily publishable. All we ask is that we get credit. Put IISS in the footnote, and it's rapidly quotable and readily usable. Can you imagine being an action officer crashing on a project, and it's due at 6 in the morning. You're up at 1 in the morning, and there's nobody you can call. But hey, you got access to this data tool. You've got information at your fingertips, and the information is not just data. It's also all of the scholarly analysis articles that are published by our researchers that talk about why the information is important and what it means and how it's affecting international decision making on the government side, on the industry side, how it's affecting conflicts, what is going on in terms of future projections. It's really a one-stop shopping tool that combines numbers, quantities, policies, and analytical research by our educated staff to enrich this database and make it really functional and usable for the individual.
And EJ, you mentioned something I think that's critically important, is that it's not just data, right? It's expert advice from one of the world's leading experts in think tank kind of information. You didn't pull that out of your hat of pulling this information and using it on Capitol Hill either.
No, in fact, we've been quoted many times on briefings by senior officials from the U.S. government talking to the U.S. Congress, yep. and in the Bundestag, and in the French Parliament, and in the Japanese Diet, and in the Israeli Knesset. I mean, this is a worldwide tool available to our clients, and because it's open source, and because we stand behind the information that is published, it is relied upon, it is trusted, and it is readily usable.
Yeah, and the readily usable always gets me. So I'm going to ask this question, then we'll get into a couple of the questions that I see that have come in through email. So here we go. What are you interested in? You need a demo trial of Military Balance Plus. By the way, that's free. My favorite 4-letter word. IISS research or other than Military Balance. Love that, because you guys are a lot broader than just Military Balance Plus, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Dave. And
yeah.
We cover the full gamut, and we provide bespoke research to suit the questions that our clients have.
Mm-hmm. And if there's anything else that you need, just fill that out and we'll make sure we get to that. And participation is absolutely easy and relatively painless. So I have a couple questions here. Where do you get your data? Great question.
So our data is publicly available information. Our researchers, we have a team of researchers that gather this information year round and continuously update the database. As I said, we've been doing this for 60 plus years. So the database grew from initially looking at the status of NATO forces when NATO was a much smaller organization, and comparing them against the Warsaw Pact, and over time have built up to 171 nations that we track and update in this database. We use our own researchers to verify the data. We also have a network of associates around the globe who help us to provide and to verify the information. And all the information that we have is in fact shared with the countries that we're profiling for their comment and validation. So by those three gross efforts, we ensure that the information is triple checked before it is published as information that we will stand behind.
That's fantastic. And how current is your intel?
Well, as I said, it is continuously updated. So we will be launching the next version of the Military Balance book on Thursday. So the 2021 edition will be launched in a launch event in London at, I think it's going to be early for Washington. I think it'll be at 5 a.m. Washington time, but it's mostly a press event. And then it will be publicly available to the community. But throughout the year, we're updating the database so that the information available in the tool is the most current and up-to-date information that we at IISS have available for the community.
And that's fantastic. Will the briefing, is this being recorded? Yes. It is being recorded, and we'll have a link for that as well as all the additional documentation. And so this is pretty specific. What is the difference between this and other information sources?
Well, that's a very good question. Look, there are a lot of different sources out there. Some of them are extremely detailed. Others break things up into domains, so they may treat air or land or sea. They may go into great detail on all of the minute components, but not cover the different series or types of weapons in the same detail. We like to claim that our database, particularly when it comes to equipment, we're equipment focused, so we're talking about the major end items or the big systems. We do have some components, and we focus on making sure that we have the most current information on defense economics, defense equipment, the numbers of troops in the types of units. So we break it down. You can query all the way down to usually about battalion level in different nations' armies to see types of units and the equipment that they use. And then in the acquisition information, we break it down by the phases of acquisition. So you have all of the information from, we're requesting information to having retired and closed out production and delivery of equipment. So it's really I think what makes us stand out is the fact that we are a one-stop shopping, reliable and immediately usable source of information. We're not the only one, and we're not dealing in classified information, but for the specific purposes of open source information that is readily and rapidly usable between governments, between industries, between users for various purposes, we think we're the best possible source in the market today.
Yeah, and there's certainly, with your advice and your additional information from experts, that makes it so much easier to use and implement within the organization. As I mentioned earlier, you're not obligated to purchase from anyone. But if you would like to engage with IISS and check out Military Balance Plus, here's their information, DUNS number, cage code for all the contracting folks that are here that know what to do with those, as well as the direct information that you can call and talk to EJ directly or access it with IISS.org and through partners. If you need anything socioeconomic, anything for the contracting side, that is something that can be done through partners as they continue to work into supporting the federal space. And you will get a recap email next week, early next week. You have a briefing presentation. You can link to the video, pass it through your organization. If there's additional information you would like, you can have one-on-one discussions with EJ and his team to talk about agency requirements. If you're interested in a demo or a trial, if you click that, we will make sure you get that, first of all. Secondly, making sure that that you have access to additional information that you need, because some folks were asking for that as well. And we want to be almost on time, EJ. We're 1 minute past, but we want to say thank you for joining us today for this interagency briefing. EJ, great information, wealth of knowledge. Appreciate your service in the military as well. Thank you very much for that, and your family.
Well, thank you very much, Dave, and thank you to the audience for your time and your attention, and I look forward to dealing with you in the future.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us. If there's anything else you need, please reach out to EJ, and we will make that happen. Thanks again, EJ. Good stuff.